Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mike Carlson,
I'm Brian Heisenbuttel.
and on this episode of The View from the U, we're going to talk a little Alabama QB controversy. We got Ameer Abdullah, Penn State, rising falling stocks, beat the farm. It's crazy. Brian, lead us off.
All right, first thing we got to talk about the Nebraska Huskers almost falling to McNeese State. Really tight game, but Ameer Abdullah, we got to talk about this guy. He was quite a presence last year, but Nebraska wasn't all that high in the Big Ten stock. Now this guy's back. Of course, he had a miracle play to get that winning touchdown for the Huskers. Mike, break it down. What do you see in this guy?
It was nuts. Ameer Abdullah, it's a well drawn up play, especially in that situation. You want to get the first down, obviously, and move into field goal range, but after that, it's like found money, Brian. You can't ask for a couple of Madden-like broken tackles, pressing the circle button, putting the spin moves on, using the hit stick. I mean, it was nuts. Hats off to Ameer Abdullah. McNeese State, better luck next time, but you can't help if you're McNeese State. That's a moral victory in itself, just being able to hang with Nebraska like that.
I mean, you said yourself, Madden-like move. We see this guy, that play alone shows all of his skills. He's got speed, he's got intelligence. He broke around 6 tackles on that play. It was absolutely insane, and it's really looking promising for the Huskers. But Mike, we got to talk about the bit of controversy right now with Alabama. Break it down for us.
Okay, we have 2 QBs. I'm a quarterbacks fan. I love quarterbacks in a second life. In my past life, I'm hoping that I was a quarterback. We got a little controversy going on here at Alabama. They've been spoiled the last couple years with the likes of Greg McElroy and, of course, my man A.J. McCarron. But right now, they have 2 competing quarterbacks, Blake Sims and Jake Coker. Jake Coker is a transfer from Florida State. He was Jameis's understudy and actually competed with Jameis for the starting job last year. Didn't make it, transferred at the end of the season, and due to some eligibility rules was able to start immediately this year. We have Blake Sims. He's been A.J. McCarron's understudy for the last couple years. So, Brian, it becomes, both quarterbacks played really well this weekend. But if you're Nick Saban, it's a pick-your-poison type of deal because Sims has his perks, Coker has his perks, and I don't feel like you can go wrong. It just becomes a matter of who can win the most games for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it may be one of those things where it comes down to a mistake here or a mistake there. Because Alabama, yes, they've had West Virginia, which was a closer game than we would have expected, like maybe last season when they were still the number 1 seed. But still, it's not quite the best performance of Alabama, and we haven't really seen them take on a Texas A&M or a Georgia. And once those games roll around, we're going to get a really good evaluation of these guys. I'm excited.
If it was up to me, I think I'd have to go with Jake Coker just because I think the guy's a lot better quarterback. He knows how to play the position well. Was Jameis's understudy last year for most of the season. He gets winning. He gets playing the quarterback position. Blake Sims is great and all, but I think Jake Coker's your man if you want the most efficient passer in an Alabama offense that's running a pro-style of manner. So, Coker's got my vote. Sims obviously, has his perks and, his faults, but right now, if I have to pick a quarterback to start the next game, it's got to be Jake Coker.
Yeah, and it comes down to Nick Saban's vote, which we'll see next week, and it's going to be really interesting for the future of this Alabama team. But Mike, we got to move it to my favorite conference, the Big Ten Conference. Right behind us, Penn State finally has the postseason ban lifted by the NCAA. It happened earlier this week, and Mike, this is so good for this program because they've come such a long way from just being demoralized since the end of the Joe Paterno era, the downfall of Penn State football, having to have a statue removed, and it was really just a bad time for one of the great football programs in the NCAA. And now that the ban's lifted, it's sort of a start over. They got James Franklin, fantastic coach as we all know. And I'm excited to see where this Penn State team will go.
I'm excited too, but I think you got to give a lot of love to Bill O'Brien in the NFL, of course. He did a great job handling Penn State, in the years in the post-Paterno era. I think you got to give him some love. Obviously, James Franklin out of Vanderbilt, great coach as well. And, the NCAA, whether they made the right or wrong call here, I won't speculate just because, there's so many different facts on either side that you have to take into account. But I'm just happy as a college football fan to see Penn State back in postseason contention, back in bowl contention. And, they're a team, Brian, that, with the Big Ten that's very weak, they could run the table. And we may see them in the first BCS tournament.
Yes. Speaking of Big Ten, as we go into our rising and falling stock, the Big Ten just is in a sorry state. Falling teams in the Big Ten, Purdue, Northwestern, and, of course, victim to your guys, the Michigan Wolverines, getting absolutely blanked by the Irish. And, what are you going to do with these guys? What's the next step for this program? Because Notre Dame's a rival. This is their last meeting. Huge game, and they were just demoralized.
If it's up to me, you got to revamp the offense in Michigan. Devin Gardner and Denard Robinson were great, but long term they weren't the answer. They were great the first 4 or 5 games of the season. Denard Robinson, those guys were all in Heisman contention those first couple weeks, but then it came down to injuries. Those guys just take too many hits as quarterbacks. I feel like you got to revamp the offense, more pro style, or at least a spread pass instead of a spread running type of an offense. You got to maybe get some new recruits in, get some new blood in. But right now, if you're a Michigan fan, I'm sorry, it's this rebuilding project could take a year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it with Clemson last week. I'm going to talk about it with Michigan this week. When I was at the first Michigan game against Appalachian State, just about every play was thrown to Devin Funchess. He's a fantastic wide receiver, no discredit to this guy. But again, he's sort of like that Calvin Johnson figure, and while it's great if he can get open and catch passes, if you just have that one target, and it doesn't look like Gardner has that much confidence in his other receivers, you could just run into the problem of having a team like Notre Dame, who's absolutely stellar, put a defender on him who he really can't run around, and then what's your offense?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you take away the offense, it's a very, one-dimensional offense. And if you're Michigan right now, you're in dire straits. You got to figure out, what's going to work, what's going to do better. But Brian, moving from your favorite conference to my favorite conference, the Pac-12, USC rising stock against Stanford. Hashtag beat the farm. USC, just having a great weekend, I feel like, as far as football goes.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there was even more controversy with Coach Sarkisian, what happened in the offseason. This really is a bit of a redeemer for him because, early in the season, new coach, powerhouse Stanford football team with really high expectations, and they came in there and they really put on a show. I mean, Stanford in the first half, their offense was, I wouldn't say lacking, but not up to what we would expect Stanford to be, and they were just consistent in the offense, really good in the defense, and really the same kind of tools, with the exception of the ridiculous field goal to win the game, were the same tools that were used to beat Stanford last year, used in this same game.
And I feel like, USC, the future is bright for them. Obviously, Coach Sarkisian doing a great job so far, taking over for Lane Kiffin. And, they they got a tough schedule in front of them. They will, if I remember correctly, dodge Oregon this year. So, Brian, we could see them as a legitimate Pac-12 contender at this point, I feel like.
All right, welcome back. We had a few technical difficulties, but Mike, we're going to conclude here with our rising stocks. We got to talk about Virginia Tech. Massive upset, knocking off Ohio State. Not certain if it's as glorious an upset as it would have been if Braxton Miller was in command, but let's face it, they knocked off a massive powerhouse football team.
They definitely did, and like we said, we're having technical difficulties right now, and Ohio State had multiple difficulties, against Virginia Tech. It's tough when you don't have a winning quarterback like Braxton Miller, a guy who's not familiar with the system. It starts with the quarterback position. And, anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar, I feel like. Those are the field generals. Those are the guys who command the offense. Virginia Tech was able to exploit that. And, Ohio State has a tough road ahead of them just to get back into that playoff now. But the way the Big Ten is, Michigan State lost. I feel like if Michigan State wins, Ohio State loses. We've got a big issue if you're Ohio State. But because, Michigan State lost as well, if you're Urban Meyer, I would not hit that shiny crimson panic button just yet.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the Big Ten. I mean, teams that are still undefeated, you have Wisconsin, and that's just about it as far as quality teams. I mean, if you're looking at the grand scope, they really have a bit of ground to cover, but not that much if they want to get back to the Big Ten championship. But Mike, as you are a quarterback man, let's talk about Heisman contenders. Your guy, Notre Dame, Everett Golson.
Number 5, Everett Golson. That's why I'm holding that up. He's having a great season. Obviously, that year off he looks a lot bigger, looks a lot stronger, is throwing the ball a lot well, has poise in the pocket. He looks, light years ahead of where he was his freshman year. And Brian, I think this win over Michigan, not only a win over Michigan, but a dominating win over Michigan to the tune of 31 points to 0. It vaults him in a Heisman contention right now.
I mean, it really does. I mean, you have just pure dominance over this Michigan defense. There's no other way to explain it. He was a better quarterback than the defense was, and he just ran by them, threw over them all game. And it really shows how he is that elite quarterback like we saw Jameis Winston last year. And he could make another run for the national championship. You've been good to pick that when you pick your quarterbacks. But as we have to close the show, give us your Twitter shout-outs.
I've got to give a shout-out. Hashtag fight on to USC. Taking down Stanford. The hashtag beat the farm was trending Saturday. I'm really psyched. Great for Coach Sark. Great for Cody Kessler. Great for the program at USC. I'm loving it right now, Brian. I'm absolutely loving it.
All right, and on that note, we're going to sign off for this week. Until next week, I'm Brian Hasenbottle.
And I'm Mike Carlson.
Thank you for watching.